The gavel cracked like bone, and the room forgot to breathe as Lena Cole said, "That sound is a burial." The judge looked past her while whispers rose like smoke. Evan Hart said, "Walk with me, please," and his voice was a blanket laid over fire. Cameras blinked, hungry and blind, as Maya's hands steadied on the bench's polished edge. A clerk mouthed sorry. A bailiff avoided her eyes. Maya's phone buzzed with a number that did not belong to anyone living. She answered to static. Then a rasp said, "They buried Lena under paperwork and favors." Maya said, "Who are you?" but the line tasted like metal and cut out. The verdict's echo kept marching down the hall. Evan said, "This can still bend toward truth," yet his calm felt rehearsed. Maya stared at the door and pictured a night river, swallowing names. The hallway smelled like paper and lemon, and the buzz of bad news lingered like a fly. Evan Hart said, "You should drink water," and the suggestion sounded almost tender. Lena Cole said, "Water does not wash evidence," and she watched a door swallow the judge. A vending machine clacked like a metronome counting down her patience. Evan said, "You are not alone," and he stood close enough to feel present but not to claim. Maya said, "Alone is safer than guided," and her smile was a bruise no one saw. A reporter laughed too brightly and it fractured the air. Evan said, "There are ways that do not set you on fire," and his eyes pleaded for trust. Maya said, "Fire is how darkness shows its shape," and she pushed past the hum of fluorescent light. The records room exhaled dust and secrets, and Maya traced labels like scars. A clerk shrugged at an empty slot and looked away. Jonah Price said, "They moved high-value files off-site," and his voice carried steadiness like ballast. Maya said, "High value to whom?" And the alarm test chirped once, then twice, then grew teeth. The lights hesitated, and the room blinked. Jonah said, "Time to walk," and he angled his body to shield her from the doorway. Maya said, "I asked for a copy at noon," and the clock insisted it was already too late. The sprinkler pipe creaked with threat but held. Jonah said, "We exit through loading," and he ushered her past a cart that smelled of bleach. Maya said, "Someone knew I was coming," and the hallway swallowed the answer. The alley was a throat of brick and rain, and a distant siren stitched the dark. Riley Quinn said, "You are looking in the wrong building," and defiance flickered like a match. Lena Cole said, "Who sent you?" and her stance narrowed to keep flight possible. Riley said, "Your sister met people who make doors appear," and the words tripped but landed hard. A dumpster lid boomed and scattered a cat into shadow. Riley said, "Slate has a clinic where footage forgets itself," and the sentence tasted of fear. Maya said, "You knew her," and the ache stepped forward. Riley said, "She kept me from doing something stupid," and the rain underlined the confession. Maya said, "You will tell me everything," and lightning far away agreed. The records counter looked tired, and the woman behind it guarded 1,000 small mercies. Lena Cole said, "Have you heard the name Victoria Slate?" and the air went thin. Clara Briggs said, "Some names are doors, some are cliffs," and her fingers paused mid-stamp. Maya said, "My sister walked through one," and the stamp landed crooked. The clock ticked like a warning under glass. Clara said, "If you keep saying it, someone will answer," and she did not mean help. Maya said, "I am counting on that," and the words steadied her shoulders. A copier coughed to life, and then jammed. Clara said, "Careful what you wake," and slid a scrap with a street written in shaky ink. Maya said, "I will not go quiet," and the glass bell hummed as the door swung shut. The apartment kept a museum hush, and dust traced the edges of Lena's sketches. Lena Cole said, "She drew doors with no handles," and her thumb dragged along a graphite street. Evan Hart said, "Grief edits memory," and he set water on the sill like an offering. Maya said, "Memory edits justice," and the word justice clicked like a locked drawer. The phone sat quiet for once, yet the silence carried the caller's rasp. Evan said, "Let me carry some of it," and his voice softened the room by degrees. Maya said, You carry warmth like strategy, and the air thinned around the sealed letter. Evan said, open it when it helps, not when it hurts, and he looked away. Maya said, it hurts either way, and she folded the sketch that hung with Lena's absent hand. The diner bled neon, and the window kept the night at bay. Evan Hart drew a web on a napkin and said, power is quiet until it is not. Maya Cole said, spell it, and steam from coffee curled like a question. Evan said, slate collects favors, then trades silence for access. He tapped names that bent toward one point, and the napkin grew crowded. Maya said, where do I press without breaking bones I need? Evan said, you press the hinge, not the door, and slid a card across. Maya said, you always know which hinge squeals, and the compliment tasted wary. Evan said, let me make the first call, and the jukebox changed songs without asking. The parking deck smelled of oil and rain that never reached the ground. Riley Quinn said, use me or lose the trail, and the sketchbook slapped against her side. Maya Cole said, you started this fire, and the word fire did not scare her tonight. Jonah Price said, we do this clean, and he scanned the levels like a metronome. Riley said, Slate has a clinic where footage forgets, and her defiance flickered. Maya said, we go together or not at all. And she tightened her coat. Jonah said, roots go through me, and he traced an exit on a dusty hood. Riley said, no ghosting me when it gets hot, and the line carried old burns. Maya said, we move, we verify, we live, and the siren outside slid past like a blade. The letter waited on the table, like a held breath that refused to die. Maya Cole said, you have lived in my pocket longer than truth, and the paper listened. Outside, a bus sighed and carried strangers somewhere easy. Maya said, if you knew a way out, you should have left a map, and the tape crackled. Her nail lifted one corner, then fell back as if touching flame. She said, when I open you, the day you vanished stops moving. The fridge hummed, and a small plant leaned into the window's thin light. Maya said, not yet, and she slid the letter under the sketch that always hums in memory. The room kept the promise for a few more breaths. The storage unit felt like a throat of corrugated metal and stale air. Jonah Price said, no solo moves, and he set 3 cheap radios on the table. Maya Cole said, no unsourced tips, and she lifted one and weighed it like a stone. Riley Quinn said, no talking down to the kid, and the corner of her mouth dared them. Jonah said, every lead roots through me, and he drew arrows on a taped map. Maya said, every risk roots through me, and the words surprised even her. Riley said, every lie costs twice, and she tightened the strap on her pack. Jonah said, we prioritize survival, and his steady gaze did not blink. Maya said, we prioritize truth that survives, and the unit's light buzzed like a warning. The municipal data lab hummed like a hive, and every monitor reflected a lie too clean to smudge. Maya Cole said, play it again, and the cursor scraped across a midnight gap. All you. Riley Quinn said, she walks in at 21:17, and hope bit her lip. The timeline blinked and turned to snow, then settled on a cheerful screensaver no one asked for. Jonah Price said, purge happened after your request, and his jaw worked like a locked hinge. Maya said, that means they were watching me, and the room shrank to the size of a throat. Riley said, we still have the access log, and she lifted her sketchbook like a warrant. Jonah said, names live in backups, not faces, and he checked the clock twice. Maya said, then we hunt where film forgets, and the cursor trembled under her hand. The records office smelled like toner and practiced smiles, and the blinds sliced noon into obedient stripes. Evan Hart said, you were at the fundraiser, and the supervisor's shoulders softened. Maya Cole said, we need donor audits, and she kept her voice as level as a ledger. Evan said, this helps the board avoid embarrassment, and the word embarrassment fitted the lock. The supervisor toyed with a key card that had seen too many favors. Maya said, time matters, and the second hand marched like a drum line. Evan said, "There is an off-site archive for sensitive filings," and the keycard finally stopped moving. Maya said, "Address," and the pause stretched like taffy. The supervisor whispered a street that maps prefer to forget. The off-site warehouse crouched behind a fence that knew every trespasser by name. Jonah Price said, "Patrols every 9 minutes," and his watch clicked like a metronome. Riley Quinn said, "Windows on the south breathe," and she sketched vents and shadows with fast lines. Maya Cole said, "We enter on their breath," and she tested the gate for weakness. A text lit Jonah's phone and froze the night into a mirror. He said, "Wrong number," and pocketed a warning that wore his name. Maya said, "We move now," and the rain paused to listen. Riley said, "I am not baggage," and the sketch tore neatly along a fold. Jonah said, "On my count," and the fence exhaled. Inside, the air tasted of cardboard and old promises, and rows of pallets made a maze that disliked strangers. Riley Quinn said, "Left, then stairs," and her drawing became a compass. Maya Cole said, "Eyes for ledger books," and dust lifted like soft applause. Jonah Price said, 3 minutes, and his voice kept time better than clocks. Maya found a binder labeled Outreach that felt heavier than paper. She said dates matched the week she vanished, and her mouth went dry. Riley said, "There is a shell name repeated," and she underlined with the edge of light. Jonah said 2 minutes, and a far door kissed its frame. Maya said, "Photograph, then we run," and the page reflected her pulse. The alarm woke like a trapped animal, and red strobes chopped the world into knives. Jonah Price said, "Route B now," and he shoved the mezzanine door wide. Riley Quinn said, "They are early," and her feet flew before fear could object. Maya Cole said, "You knew this doc," and the accusation ran beside them. Jonah said, "I walked it once for work," and the word work carried a history she did not like. A guard's radio scratched a name that sounded close to hers. Riley said, "Down the belt," and slid along a conveyor that remembered boxes. Maya said, "Truth or nothing," and vaulted after her. Jonah said, "Keep low," and the exit air tasted like rain and sirens. The gala glittered like a lie with perfect teeth, and the string quartet tuned its guilt. Victoria Slate said, "Closure arrives when you stop chasing ghosts," and the champagne barely hissed. Maya Cole said, "Closure is what you sell when truth gets expensive," and the chandelier blinked. Victoria said, "Your sister courted trouble and found it," and her smile did not move her eyes. Maya said, "She met your people and vanished," and the word vanished scraped glass. Evan Hart said, "Let us keep this civil," and his hand hovered like a truce that served someone else. Victoria said, "I collect order, not secrets," and the donors laughed on cue. Maya said, "Order is a ledger with blood in the margins," and the quartet slid sharp. Victoria said, "Careful what you wake," and the room cooled by a degree. Maya said, "Awake is all I have left," and the cameras leaned in. The bus shelter clicked with ads that never blinked, and rain braided the night into ropes. Riley Quinn said, "Lena pulled me off a job and told me to breathe," and the memory stung clean. Maya Cole said, "You knew her fear," and the city held its breath between lights. Riley said, "A fixer offered me a family that charged interest," and her fist found her pocket seam. Maya said, "You were a child, asked to pay adult debts," and the sentence landed soft. Riley said she met them at a clinic with cameras that forget, and the water climbed her cuffs. Maya said, "You should have told me day one," and the hurt walked out into traffic. Riley said, "I wanted to be chosen, not used," and her voice stood straighter. Maya said, "I choose you for the truth you carry," and the bus did not stop. The underpass hummed like a throat, and headlights stitched light across damp concrete. Maya Cole said, "You warned someone," and the accusation did not need volume. Jonah Price said, "I reduced risk," and the word risk wore her face. Maya said, "Alarms tripped early because you measured me against their comfort," and gravel answered. Jonah said, I have chosen larger safety before, and slept poorly, and his eyes did not beg. Maya said, greater good always bills the nearest heart, and the echo returned unpaid. Jonah said, I keep people alive, and his hands opened like empty pockets. Maya said, keep me whole, not just breathing, and the timing hurt. A truck roared by and shook loose a sheet of water. Jonah said, on the next move, nothing leaks, and the vow hung heavy. The clinic cafeteria smelled like bleach and microwaved hope, and the vending machines hummed. Alma Reed said, I altered logs for Slate, and the sentence landed like a dropped tray. Maya Cole said, say it for the record, and her phone waited face down. Alma said, they called it outreach, but the ledger ate names, and her hands worried a paper cup. The fluorescent light flickered and wrote fear on the tile. Alma said, your sister came late, smiling like she had a ticket out, and the smile died in her throat. Maya said, who walked her out, and the machines blinked brand colors. Alma said, the fixer with clean shoes, and her eyes skittered left. Jonah Price's reflection hung in the glass like a shadow that knew roots. Alma said, I should go, and she did. Maya's living room kept the city outside like a secret that wanted in, and the letter slept. Evan Hart said, I found this behind a clinic panel, and the flash drive winked too bright. Maya Cole said, you found it fast, and the syllables weighed more than metal. Evan said, a friend owed me a favor, and the word friend stretched thin. Maya said, favors circle Slate like moons, and the orbit felt wrong. Evan said, take the win, and his smile tried to sound tired. Maya said, winds that arrive early know the route, and her thumb hovered over the port. The drive sat like bait that learned to breathe. Evan said, I want you safe, and the wish knocked at the wrong door. Maya said, I want you honest, and the lamp clicked louder than it should. Chambers smelled like leather and verdicts already decided, and the blinds carved the table into stripes. Maya Cole said, the ledger ties outreach money to a shell that pays fixers, and her voice did not wobble. Slate's attorney said, coincidence and conjecture, and his cufflinks grinned. Jonah Price said, security footage was purged hours after her request, and the clock seemed to flinch. Maya said, that purge is intent, and she slid timestamps that bruised the wood. The judge tapped a pen that hated silence. Evan Hart said, community harm demands clarity, and he did not meet her eyes. Maya said, names were bought, and my sister disappeared inside the purchase, and the room cooled. Slate's attorney said, you see patterns because grief prefers order, and the pen stopped tapping. Maya said, order is what keeps doors shut, and the chamber remembered its oath. The apartment turned into a chapel of paper and breath, and the letter waited like a border. Maya Cole said, you have lived between my ribs, and the tape peeled with a tired sigh. The page smelled of rain that never fell. She read, if this reaches you, I trusted someone close to Slate who promised air, and the promise scraped. She said, you aimed at the hinge, and her throat burned clean. The word clinic blinked in Lena's careful hand, alongside a time that bent the alibi. Maya said, you left me a map I refused to read, and the lamp hummed. Somewhere a siren unspooled and forgot to stop. She said, I am opening the door you marked, and her hands stopped shaking. The city pressed its ear to the glass and waited. The storage unit hummed like a fluorescent confession, and tape on the floor kept its own map. Maya Cole said, you routed intel both ways, and the radios on the tables stared. Jonah Price said, I kept the temperature down, and the word kept felt small. Maya said, you called alarms early to calm Slate, and the syllables refused mercy. Riley Quinn said, you played bouncer for the truth, and her knuckles whitened on a strap. Jonah said, I chose the greater good once before, and lost less than I feared, and his eyes did not hide. Maya said, you lost me, and the unit found an echo. Jonah said, I can still fix the next step, and the promise sounded dull. Maya said, stand down and stop choosing for me, and the radios crackled as if they agreed. The penthouse office floated above the city like a calm threat, and glass made every secret a reflection. Victoria Slate said, "You can have quiet money and a seat on a task force," and the skyline did not blink. Maya Cole said, "You are offering me a soft lock," and her mouth tasted metal. Victoria said, "A story without a villain will sell better," and the carpet swallowed the step. Maya said, "Truth or nothing," and the elevator hummed in agreement. Victoria said, "Nothing is cold," and her eyes held. Evan Hart said, "This ends the bleeding," and his voice was almost gentle. Maya said, "It ends the questions that matter," and the city leaned in. Victoria said, "Careful, endings can be written by those who outlive you," and her smile never moved. Maya said, "Then start reading me," and stayed standing. The courthouse steps caught the first thin light, and the crowd arrived like weather. Riley Quinn said, "We go live in 3, and her thumb steadied on a screen that shook. Maya Cole said, "Truth or nothing," and the banner scrolled hearts and knives. Alma Reed said, "I falsified logs for Slate," and saw Lena after the time on record, and the chat roared. Riley said, "Show the ledger," and pages filled the frame with dates that matched wounds. Maya said, "Charge names with daylight," and flashes popped like hail. A siren approached and decided to listen instead. Riley said, "If this feed dies, mirror it," and the comments multiplied. Maya said, "Doors open now," and the steps felt less steep. The city finally answered. Morning news marched like a drumline, and headlines pinned names to numbers that finally mattered. A prosecutor said, "We are filing charges against the shell charities," and the chyron sharpened. Maya Cole said, "They moved because the light moved," and her coffee went cold. Riley Quinn said, "Comments say bored, resignations are personal," and she rolled her eyes. Victoria Slate said, "I have done nothing wrong," and her recorded smile did not blink. Maya said, "Innocence never needs so many mirrors," and she muted the sound. The ticker scrolled donors who used to refuse daylight. Riley said, "We started a crack," and her voice steadied. Maya said, "Cracks are where truth grows," and the apartment felt larger. Sirens passed without stopping, as if the city finally remembered its job. The park kept winter on a short leash, and benches wore frost like thin armor. Evan Hart said, "I softened your instincts when Slate asked," and the confession landed heavy. Maya Cole said, "You called it care and sold it as safety," and her breath made pale ghosts. Evan said, "I feared they would crush you," and his hands learned stillness. Maya said, "You feared losing access, and the path held its silence." Evan said, "I can testify to the network," and hope tried to wake. Maya said, "Testify but not to me," and the bridge sorted birds from wind. Evan said, "I am sorry," and the apology looked practiced. Maya said, "I am finished being handled," and she stood. The pond tucked the echo under thin ice. The precinct lobby smelled of sanitizer and old choices, and the floor shone like a warning. Jonah Price said, "I am here to surrender," and the desk sergeant did not blink. Maya Cole said, "Tell them everything about the alarms," and she kept her distance. Jonah said, "I will plead to what I broke," and his voice found gravel. Riley Quinn said, "Make it count," and she stared at the exit. Jonah said, "I thought I could shape the fire," and the word thought cracked. Maya said, "We burn cleaner without you steering," and the calendar behind glass turned a page. The sergeant said, hands, and the cuffs clicked like punctuation. Jonah said, "Do the next move without me," and he faced the hallway. Maya said, "We will," and the doors breathed. The clinic loading bay was a throat of concrete and echoes, and the hum returned like a memory. Maya Cole said, "Listen," and a delivery timestamp blinked on a faded monitor. Riley Quinn said, "Same hour as the letter," and her breath fogged the glass. Maya said, "She was here after the official time," and the lie sagged. A forklift beeped in a distant bay, polite and cruel. Maya said, "The humming was this motor," and the recognition cut clean. Riley said, "We can map the road from this gate," and she drew with a finger on dust. Maya said, "We anchor her last known minute," and the clock obliged. The concrete swallowed their footsteps and gave them back sharper. The courthouse hallway breathed like a cathedral that remembered vows, and the clerk carried a folder as if it were flame. The judge said, "The court recognizes evidence tampering and orders the case reopened," and the words rang. Maya Cole said, "Say her name," and the clerk did, steady and careful. Riley Quinn said, "We named the day," and her grin surprised her. Maya said, "This is not the ending," and relief learned to walk. Reporters hovered like weather that might behave. A detective said, "New team, new timeline," and the pen scratched the order. Maya said, "We will be ready," and the doors exhaled. The building felt taller by an inch, and the city stood up with it. The river kept its low hymn, and the bench held the shape of too many nights. Riley Quinn said, "I left space here for one more figure," and her pencil tested the sky. Maya Cole said, "She loved this bend," and the current nodded. A gull carved the gray and left it whole. Riley said, "You did not break," and the words sounded less like pity. Maya said, "I bent toward her name until it became compass," and the ache steadied. Traffic stitched distant light into a thin seam. Riley said, "We will finish the map," and the page stopped shaking. Maya said, "When truth returns, it will know us," and the bench warmed a degree. The river carried the promise without complaint. The phone rang like a knock from a corridor she finally owned. A detective said, "When we have something real, you will be first," and the line held steady. Maya Cole said, "Save the names that matter," and her breath came even. The apartment light pooled like a stage that wanted no audience. She saved the number under a song title, "Lena Never Finished." Riley Quinn said, "You are smiling without trying," and the lamp agreed. Maya said a door answered, and the keys felt lighter. The city hummed without menace. A distant siren practiced stopping. She said, "We will be ready when they call again," and the silence chose to rest. The townhouse stood like a fortress trying to learn humility. Evan Hart said, "I will not knock," and he stayed in shadow. Maya Cole said, "You do not have to," and the streetlight traced his doubt. Upstairs a window burned late, as if reading old debts. Evan said, "I can testify to the corridors," and his voice found gravel. Maya said, "Do it clean," and the night did not argue. A black car idled, and then reconsidered. Evan said, "I chose wrong," and the admission stopped wandering. Maya said, "Choose better," and began to walk. The house watched and learned fear. The evidence box waited, like a small ship, with room for only truth. Maya Cole said, "You are not a shrine," and the opened letter lay flat. The seal's ghost no longer mattered. She placed photos, notes, and a copy of the ledger that still smelled of dust. The key turned with a click that sounded final, but not cruel. Riley Quinn said, "A beginning looks like this," and the room agreed. Maya said, "We build forward, not around absence," and the air lifted. Outside, a bus sighed and chose another route. The lamp dimmed, as if tired of mourning. She said, "Rest where you can be found," and press the label down. The river took the city lights and folded them into patient lines. Maya Cole said, "If truth can be rewritten, so can the ending," and the wind kept it. A barge groaned like an old witness choosing to speak. Riley Quinn said, "We will hold the pen when it matters," and her laugh surprised the dark. Somewhere a train stitched neighborhoods together without asking. Maya said, "She marked the hinge, and we turned it," and the water approved. The night tasted like metal, but also like rain that forgives. Riley said, "Tomorrow is louder than fear," and the path brightened a shade. Maya said, "Then we walk," and the river promised to remember.